Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today's December 5th, 2022, and let's get over the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, first news I want to cover is an alleged Ukrainian strike over two Air Force bases in Russia, including in Ryazan and Saratov. And allegedly, as you can see here in the pictures, these are some Tu-22 Tupolev 22M bomber that was damaged through the strike, and you can see a fuel tanker was also destroyed. Probably the explosion of the fuel truck is what caused this bomber to get damaged, but relatively small hits, nothing major, but still huge psychological impact on the Russians. The fact that these two bases are so far away from Ukraine, and we're talking about a few hundred kilometers. If we look at the map here, Saratov is quite far in terms of distance. The closest, let's say, distance from the Ukrainian border is about 620-ish kilometers. So really, really far away. And perhaps they even struck with the drones much further from Ukraine. So it's very interesting to see how this is going to play out in the future, and also shows that the Russian airspace in Russia is very, very poorly defended. The fact that this drone allegedly was capable of flying over, almost 700 kilometers without being noticed indicates how poor the Russian air defense is in Russia, and how they've pretty much scrambled everything towards Ukraine with the sacrifice of their own borders. And not only was Saratov hit, but also in Ryazan, another airbase was hit as well in this region. So this is also about a few hundred kilometers, very close to Moscow, or closer to Moscow. So this sends a really big message to Russia and the Russian regime that they're not safe, and the Ukrainians can and have the ability to strike some very high value targets far and deep within Russian territory. So this is really huge news, and it's also because these are very important bombers that the Russians are using to strike Ukraine with their missiles on a weekly basis at this point. So these are very high value targets, and great news that the Ukrainians are striking those. This is what is needed to win. And as a retaliation for that, or at least we believe that it's a retaliation, but either way, it would have been done whether the Ukrainians would have struck the bases or not, is that the Russians have launched 70 missiles early this morning, and they sent about 70 of them, and about 60 were shot down by the Ukrainian air defense system. So it's a quite good rate of destruction. It's about 86%. However, still 10 did make its targets in Zaporizhia and Kiev mostly. So, the Russians are going to continue doing this no matter what is going to happen. However, this only exhausts their capabilities in terms of missiles and their stockpiles of missiles. The Russians just don't have the capacity anymore to build, mass produce these missiles just due to the sanctions and their requirements of chips and high value or high end materials to build them, which they lack of. So again, this retaliation, if we may call it, wasn't really fruitful for the Russians. It's again another sort of psychological attack from the Russians. So overall, great news in the sense that almost 90% of these missiles were shut down today. And this begs the question, these two hits that happened in Ryazan and Saratov, were they the actual the Ukrainian drones that are currently getting tested from by Ukroboronprom, which is the military industrial complex, the arms conglomerate of Ukraine that produces a lot of weapons. And they indicated that they successfully tested a drone that has 1,000 kilometer range, and this literally falls in line with the radius or the capacity, the range of that drone. And you can see that it does go as far as Saratov. So could it be this drone that is currently being tested and it's been now confirmed? I would call it a very successful test if that was the actual drone that they tested to fly and target the Engels Airbase in Saratov. It would be very funny, but either way, I think this is a really good move by the Ukrainians. This, I would say, should be a close brother to the Reaper drone that is currently being used by the United States. I think that if it's literally going to be a very similar Reaper drone, this is really bad news for the Russians. The Reaper has a very high payload, about 1,200 kilometers of range, so it falls in line with this 1,000 kilometer range, and it's deadly. And I think the Russians have shown their inability to protect their skies within Russia. Again, it's a massive country, and they poured all their resources in Belarus and Ukraine without really paying particular attention to their own airspace at this point. But either way, it would be very difficult to even defend it with full strength because Russia is just so massive. So this is really, really important that the Ukrainians build as many of these drones as possible. Drone warfare is the future of warfare. It's just true. We've seen how important and how impactful drones can be. The multitude of videos that we've seen throughout the front lines of Russians being hit from above with a drone, dropping, hand grenades and other kind of payload on very well dug in Russian lines is a really, really efficient tactic, and not only efficient at clearing up the trenches, but also psychologically speaking, these Russian soldiers cannot sleep at night, fully knowing that you have drones flying on top of you that you can't even, notice, and then they can hit you at any second. It's a scary thing to have, but unfortunately, this is where warfare is heading for. It's always the 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 army that has the bigger edge that wins, and so I think that drones is definitely the future for warfare. And so, speaking of drones, this leads into the Shahid drones that the Russians have been using since September. And I did indicate in my previous videos that the reason why we're not seeing as many is, according to my opinion, is that the Russians simply just ran out of them, right? Almost on a daily basis, they were sending dozens of these drones on multiple Ukrainian cities, and they were quite good at doing that, right? They were kind of destroying the infrastructure and electricity grid, and really they had a really good impact on the Ukrainian infrastructure and weakening it. But as of the last couple of weeks, we haven't seen that many of these Shahid drones, or if not at all. And so I just kind of guessed that they ran out of them. Now, there's another theory flying around that perhaps these Israeli strikes that happened a few weeks ago as well in Syria, where allegedly the Iranians had their factory set up to build these drones, were hit, and thus it rendered their incapability to build these drones because they relied so much on these factories. But now there's another unconfirmed report that perhaps the reason why the Russian Federation is not using these drones anymore is because basically in this sense is that it's the onset of the cold weather, and that these drones cannot be used during the cold weather. As Yevgeny Silkin said here, who is the Joint Forces Commander for the Strategic Communications of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, he noted that the Iranian kamikaze drones are made of plastic and other non-frost resistant materials. Thus, why the Russians cannot fly anymore, which to me makes complete sense, right? As you get higher in the air gets thinner, colder, and the chips and the electronics just are unusable. We've all been in very cold cars in -20, -30 degree weather when you're kind of turning, the radio knob and you can see the digits are kind of like not functioning. Like it takes a lot of time for the vehicle and the electrical grid to warm up. But you can imagine if you're flying hundreds of meters in the air in cold weather, and these drones probably aren't made with the best quality materials, and the chips and all the components are not made out of frost-resistant materials. Well, then you can't use these Iranian drones. And I think that perhaps the Russian Federation tried to use them, and they only realized that as they start flying in the air, they just lose connection, signal, they probably just fall apart. And so that's great news, because that means that if that's the case, no matter how many drones right now Russia is going to be getting, they won't be able to use them until spring of next year, because obviously, usually winter in Ukraine kind of ends around the end of February, beginning of March, you start seeing kind of much milder weather. So by early mid March is the only kind of time frame I would see that the Russians would be able to start using these drones again, which gives a good amount of time for the Ukrainians to really do their attack on the Russians, and potentially really push back the Russian army to really close proximity to the Russian borders. And so I have two videos I want to show you guys. There aren't many map updates today. It's relatively quiet on the entire front line, but this was a video of the strike that happened, I think, in Saratov, and you can see that this was a quite big explosion, as you can see here. It was probably the fuel tank that exploded as the kamikaze drone hit it, most likely. But either way, you can see that this was not some small explosion. And yeah, it's really interesting to see how well this camera captured this moment. The last video I wanted to share with you guys is just, how the Russian narrative just changed. In the last few months, the Russians started with so much ambition, pride, so much, cockiness and their victory and how they were about to destroy Ukraine less than a couple weeks, to really taking things very seriously. And this shows to you the importance of not letting a bully you and always fighting back when things are not right. So this is in context of Zelensky and how the world, even before the war started, we're saying that Zelensky is not a fit president. He's unfit to be leader. He's just a clown. He's a comedian. What does he know about politics? And you can see how much sometimes leaders during peace can do really bad in terms of leading. And when it comes to wartime leadership, they completely change and they become absolute, figures in history. And this is what Zelensky made himself out to be. Fortunately, this is what happened. He didn't, run away like, Joe Biden, the U.S. administration, in the beginning gave him a right out, and he said, "No, I want to stay in Ukraine. I want to fight." And so, I think that this Russian narrative that we're seeing here is very interesting. So we're laughing at Biden and the things we're saying about it, but he's not stupid. He's not in a state of dementia. So they're not even, kind of considering Biden as a weak leader anymore, right? They were laughing at everybody. They were so cocky in the beginning, these Russian politicians, and now you can see the guests and the anchors just expressing how the victory would be just imminent, to now not taking things very lightly and not underestimating their opponents. And so we have this problem of putting labels on people. To say that Zelensky is a clown, he's not a clown. He's very dangerous. He is very dangerous. Treating him like a clown, no, he is very dangerous. He's very dangerous, and that's how we should treat him. That's the way I'd treat him if I were the leadership. As a very dangerous man, and not as simple as a fool as he's always been called. So essentially, he repeated the word dangerous like dozens of times, but you can see that the narrative is really changed in the Kremlin. And a lot of these guests, I've been seeing this change of narrative the last month or so of them sort of just like changing the way that they see the Ukrainians, right? They saw him as a joke in the beginning. Now they see him as a real opponent that actually can do a lot of damage to the Russian regime. And so they're scared. You can see that they have a lot of fear now, calling, Biden and Zelensky dangerous. The Ukrainian people are not something that we should take lightly. To them now, even admitting that, if, let's just say, theoretically speaking, there was one show a couple days ago where the host was saying that if we were to lose this war, we should consider that the entire, Western Hemisphere is going to accuse us of being, war criminals and what's going to happen. So there is a real fear right now within Russia of losing. And they don't really know how to swallow that. They don't know how to act with that. They don't know because they're scared of everything at this point. Putin, of the West, the Ukrainians, they are in constant fear. And this is how they should be, because their end is coming very, very soon. Trust me. So that's it for now, guys. Again, no map updates today. Maybe in the next few days, I'll follow up with a new map update. But apart from that, thank you for watching my videos. A huge thank you for the support. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my content. And like my video if you like my video. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.